Again, people often ask me, where do you get these examples? I get them from watching people play cribbage every week. These are all examples of discarding to your own crib. And in this case, I didn't show what the person threw, but in every one of these cases, it wasn't what should have been thrown. And I don't want to go through them all, but there are some that are, you sort things out sometimes. You've got the second puzzle down, the second group of cards down. It happens pretty frequently. We got 2 3-card runs. At the bottom of the hand, we got a 2, 3, 4. It's the other person's crib. At the top of the hand, we got a 6, 7, 8. But of course, even though the 2, 3, 4, 6 is a wonderful pegging hand for the non-dealer, you can't hold it to throw a 7, 8 to your opponent's crib. So you play the 6, 7, 8 with the deuce and throw the 3, 4. Start with 7 points and a chance for 16. If you go down a little further there's a group of cards, and this is often the case too. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 down is a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9. Very often when you have a long string of cards like that, the best discard is at the top and the bottom of the hand. Just start doing that automatically. When you have a long string of cards, look at the top and the bottom. In that hand, the best discard you can make is the deuce 9. And you hold the 3, 4, 5, 6. If you go down a little further, now these are all the opponent's crib, remember. We're not discarding to our own crib now. We're working on the opponent's crib now. If you go down another 4, you see a 1, 4, 4, 10, deuce 5. Well, the 1, 4, 4, 10 looks inviting, doesn't it? So you throw the deuce 5? No. How many of you have noticed how nicely a 4, 4, deuce 5 works? Yeah, great hand to play. You got a whole lot of cards that'll give you 12 points or more. And so you end up throwing the 110. You hold 4, 4, deuce 5 and throw the 110. What does it take to make a 110 work? 4. And you got 2 of them. You got 2 of them. So you've made a really safe discard. And you've held a hand that is benefits by a lot of cuts. And then if you go down here, about 4 up from the bottom, there's a 1, 1, 4, 10, 7, 8. Remember, it's always the other person's crib on this sheet. Other person's crib all the time. So you got 6 points. If you throw the 7, 8 away, which averages 6, 0.4. So if you throw the 7, 8 away and hold 6, you're starting with 0. Better to hold 4 and include the 7, 8 with a 1, 1. And throw the 4, 10. And the 4, 10 again is a relatively safe discard. Why?
It takes the ace to make it.
You got 2 aces in your hand. There's only 4 in the deck. You got 50% of them in your hand. The next to the last one, I see this hand every week. It's a 3, 4, 5, 8 with a 10 king. It could be a 10 queen. In this case, I made it a 10 king. You always want to look. When you're holding a 10-point card with a 3, 4, 5, you always want to look, did you have a 7 or an 8? Because the 7 or the 8 with the 3, 4, 5, you can score 14 points. You can't score 14 points if you hold any of those 10 pointers. And the other thing it does for you a lot of times, you can pitch the 10 king or the 10 queen or the queen king. You've got a better hand to peg with the 8 and the 3 and the 4, 5. And you've got a lower crib. So you have the potential to cut 14 rather than 12. So look for that, 8, 3, 4, 5 or 7, 3, 4, 5. Very, very good hand. When we get to pegging, you'll see that there's another advantage to playing the 3, 4, 5, 8. The offensive pegging. Wonderful hand. Okay. You should have one with a 3-2 up in the corner called discarding tips number 7. Anytime you see something like this, you see at the bottom it says www.cribbage.org. It's all there. We're handing out stuff here, but if you want to check it out on the internet, a lot of the stuff is there. So there are a number of things we want to out of 10 games played in the research that I did, six as a minimum of those 10 games was decided by a crib. I mean, not in terms of counting out. Many times down at the end of the board, the crib didn't even matter. But a crib somewhere put the person in position so they could win the game. So if we can keep our opponent's cribs low scoring and put building blocks in our own, we have a chance to have as good a batting average as Jim Hornbacker over here. You don't want to try, you don't want to work on mine. To start with his, it'd be about 20% higher. So mine's headed down. Big, every class I put on, it drops another notch. So anyway, don't get discouraged. Avoid cards of sequence if you can. Discarding your opponent's crib. Much better to put a space between them, although they can score. But if you have to be close, then try to put a space between them. If you're throwing discards, try to avoid a Jack Queen. Jack Queen is a pretty strong discard. And except in rare emergencies where you got a really high scoring hand, it's the last crib of the game and it's not going to count. Throw a pair of 5s over there. Let your opponent turn them over and say, gee minis, I got a 23 crib. Well, yeah, okay. So you got a 23 crib. But I'm out, I'm sorry. As a rule, don't throw a 5 to your opponent's crib. Find a way to use it. Even if you keep a 5 with a 7, 8, 9. Even if you keep a 5 with a 1, 2, 3. I mean, it doesn't have any value, except you're depriving your opponent of 6 points every time you keep it. The 5 with anything to the opponent's crib averages right at 6. 1, 5 and 5, 9 have the lowest averages, but they're right at 6 points. So be very careful about giving it up. If you need 12 points and you've got a 7, 7, 8, 8 and a 5, 5, or a 3, 3, 3, 9 and a 5, 5, and the board says you've got to have the 12, well, keep the 12 and pitch the 5. But it should be very seldom. Avoid 15 twos and pairs. I mean, they're going to start, anytime you give them a pair, they're starting with 2. You know that. A pair can never be worth less than 2. So, the king is the most effective balking card. Balking is an old term, low scoring. If you follow the king through, and you took a king with a 1, and you compared it with the other 10-point cards with the 1, the king has a low average. If you take a middle card, doesn't matter if it's a 6, a 7, an 8, or a 9, and you put it with a king, it has a lower average than it would if you put it with a queen. than it would if you put it with a 10, than it would if you put it with a jack. If you can, I mentioned the cards with the space between them. Now, they're better than cards of sequence. I mean, a deuce 4 is a little safer than a 3-4. The deuce 4 has got a space. However, the fact that there's a space, you see the mathematical probabilities are skewed a little bit. Because if you threw a 2 and a 4, your opponent is less likely to have use for a 3. So if it's more likely to be in the crib. You're also more likely to cut a 3 than you would cut a deuce or a 4, because there's 4 3s as far as you know, and only 3 deuces and 3 4s. So you're 25% more likely to cut a 3 rather than a deuce or a 4. And because you've got these two little cards with a gap, you increase the chances that the one card your opponent will toss to the crib is the one that fits between them. So it is when you toss a 6-8, you've reduced the chances that a 7 would be of value in your opponent's hand. So if they've got a 7, it's a good chance of being in the crib. And again, the same thing on the cut. The cut is more likely to be a 7 than it would be a 6 or an 8 by about 25%. Because there's 4 7s, as far as you know, and 3 6s and 3 8s. So you get a better chance to fill the hand, fill the gap. Of course, some of them are worse than others. I do want to talk some about cards of the same suit. Don't worry about it. If you change suits, for instance, I see people every week won't throw the 10 king because it's the same suit, but they got a 9 king of different suits. Well, what do you think has a lower average? A 10 king of the same suit has a lower average than a 9 king of different suits. And so it goes on all down the list. The averages are what they are. And a crib flush occurs once in 780 deals, which is about 79 games of cribbage. You know what those two cards of the same suit are worth? 4/100 of 1 point. 4/100 of 1 point. You could throw them 25 times and they'd be worth 1. So don't worry about it. Now, if you have a choice, sure. If you have a choice, save the 400s and make it an unsuited 10K rather than a suited 10K. But if you don't have the choice, dump them anyway. Don't worry about it. There's got to be 5 in the crib for it to matter, and it doesn't. So, 680. I said 780. Some of you were reading ahead of me probably. I saw a couple of frowns out there. So it's only 79 or 79.1 into that. That's the average number of deals per game, by the way, is 9.1. Now, I mentioned this under discarding to your opponent's crib, that all crib choices, all the discards, all 91 discards, have a higher value when you toss them to your opponent's crib than when you put them in your own crib. There's 2 sets of averages. And why might that be? In other words, if you look at the discarding charts, to your own crib, there's only two discards. To your opponent's crib, there's only 2 discards to your opponent's crib that average less than 4 points. What are they? 10 king and 9 king. If you look at your opponent's discarding table, look at your discarding table, doesn't look that way at all. In fact, 37 of the 91 to your own crib are worth less than 4 points. 37 of 91 to your own crib are worth less than 4. Only 2 are worth less than 4 when you toss them on the other side of the board. And it's not the fickle finger of fate. It's not Murphy's Law. It's not the cribbage goddess has interfered. It's just what is. The dealer is putting cards in his crib or her crib that they wouldn't think of putting in your own. So the most frequent discard the dealer makes is a 7-8. I didn't think it had the highest average. I said it's the most frequent. It's the most frequent. Why is it the most frequent? Yeah. It doesn't work with 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 6. It doesn't work with those face cards. It doesn't work with 2, 3, king, king, 1, 4, king, king. I mean, there's a whole variety of cards, double runs and nickels and dimes, that the 7-8 just doesn't work with. So you look at it and it's in the crib. Very high percentage of the time. And so when you toss 2 middle cards to your opponent, and it's 16 or 20, and you put them in yours and you got 5 because they give you the king 9, the king 6, the queen 6. Okay. 2 different games entirely. And you'll see that when we get into pegging games too, that cribbage is 2 different games entirely. There's hardly even a relationship between what happens between the dealer's position and the non-dealer's position. So, and it's just a wonderfully complex game that's so simple that some people play it a lifetime and never get beyond the blackjack stage. Hit me. Well, and you know the other thing unique, if you play some games, well, Kenny Rogers had a great song, where you got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them. Well, there's quite a few games that allow you to fold them. I mean, you pick up this lousy hand and you say bitter bunch. Some of you play that in pinochle, bitter bunch. Bad cards, you just end up throwing them in and getting another deal. You get a bad hand at the poker table, you sit out, and maybe you pay a little to the house to set out the hand. Cribbage, you're stuck with whatever you got. You just know. And in fact, if you leave, you've got to know when to hold them, when to fold them, and what the other part about it, count your money after playing's done. The ACC will suspend you. You get suspended. So you're stuck. You got these lousy cards and you're picking them up one hand after another, and you can't fold them, you can't bid or bunch, you're just stuck with them. So hopefully another time they'll be better for you. Okay. So again, I want to emphasize the key connectors. Remember, to your own crib, if you can only throw one of these, make it the 3, small card. 5, 7. If you're only throwing one middle card, make it be the 7, because that's the least likely one that your opponent will put in your crib. And if it's a face card, it's a jack. Now understand, when you're tossing a jack, you're not only giving up the chance to cut the right jack, which is 1 in 4, I guess. There's 4 jacks, right? So it must have a value of about 25/100ths of a point just to have the jack present in your hand, since there's 4 suits and you got 1 of them in your hand. So you decide to discard it. So you gave up a 1/4 of a point, and you give your opponent a chance to pick up the point. So you had a ½ point that changed it right there. 2-5 out of your hand, 2-5 into the crib. So when you think of the jack, think in terms discarding to your opponent crib. that you're not just taking the chance of giving up 1 and 4, but you're giving up a half a point.
So are you saying those 4 cards don't put in your opponent's crib?
I'm saying to your own crib, do these, to your opponent's crib, avoid them. That's how they relate here. We try to avoid them when we're discarding to the opponent's crib, but we need to keep them in mind, 3, 5, 7 jack. And we try to put them in our own crib because they're the least likely card for our opponent to drop to our crib. If your opponent is dropping a small card to your crib, their first preference would be the 1, their next preference would be the 4, the next preference would be the deuce, and the 3 would be number 4 out of the 4 small cards. And if you're looking at the 5, most people have figured out that the 5 just doesn't work with 10s and all those nickels and dimes. It works with 1s and 9s, 2s and 8s, 3s and 7s, 4s and 6s, and 6s and 7s. So it's a dynamite, super connector. On the back of that page, you'll see listed. These are all the discards that average less than 5 to your opponent's crib. These are the discards that average less than 5 to your opponent's crib. Notice at the top the 2 I mentioned that are under 4. If you come down there, very often we're looking at discarding a 1 with a 9, a 2 with a 9, a 4 with a 9. Well, the 1-9 is the safest. The lowest scoring of those is the 1-9. But there's not that much difference between, if you're looking at the 4-9 and deuce 9, they're on down there a ways, but not far off the pace. The deuce 9 and then the 4-9 comes in a little ways down. But if you look at these top, how many do you come down here? Do you see it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 of the lowest scoring discards for your opponent's crib include a 10 spot of some kind. A king, a queen, a 10. You don't see any jacks there, do you? Why do you suppose those are low scoring? Fourteen of them include a 10 spot. The reason they're low scoring is the dealer can seldom turn loose a 5. For the reasons I've already indicated, if you think of playing 9 games of cribbage, and you think how many times you wanted to put a 5 in your crib, but you couldn't. You had 3, 3, 5, 7 in your hand. You had 1, 1, 5, 9 in your hand. You had deuce, deuce, 5, 8 in your hand. I mean, what if you throw the 5 out, what do you got left? So the dealer, that's why these 14 show up there, because the dealer can't put a 5 in the crib most of the time. That's why the 10 king has the lowest score of any, because it takes a 5 to make him work. And you'll see when you get down towards the second page there, or it might be on the back of, no, it's the second page, you got a staple in there. You'll see the rest of them. You want to try to avoid those. If you know the top 10 discards, or thereabouts, you will be amazed how often they're available. If you know the 10 king, 9 king, 6 king, 6 queen, 9 queen, 8 king, 7 10 and 6 10, if you know those and they're in your mind, you'd be amazed how often you can toss one of those to your opponent's crib. Be a very high percentage. And you'll notice on the 10 king, over in that right column, I tossed it 3,535 times. 9 king, 2,392 times. All of these upper ones here are in the thousands. Discarded in the thousands. So I'm very comfortable with the averages. Here's another way of looking at it. The 10 king and the 9 king are up here because they're less than 4. Then you have a small group that average 4.1. There they are. Then you have a small group that average 4.2. There they are. And then you got the 4 threes and the 4 fours. These other two numbers out here are the actual, the total decimal point, 3 places. But that kind of gives you an idea of how they sort out. I want to talk a little bit about wide card tosses. I won't mention the author's name. I did the first time around. I never heard from him, by the way. I thought I would. So I won't mention it, but there is a book that's been written on cribbage. It spends quite a bit of time talking about wide card discards. What is the widest possible discard you could make? One and a king. Huh. I wonder how come it's not that good a discard. Because what do you think that old nasty dealer is putting on the table? If you don't have the 7-8, what's the next most frequent discard the dealer makes? 2-3. The second most frequent discard the dealer makes is a 2-3. Oh, so you just cut the deuce, and they got a 14 crib. You say, my God, I give you a king 1. Those are wide cards. I thought wide cards were good. Has nothing to do with wide cards. So when somebody tells you that, discount it. I mean, you don't have to tell them that's not so. But if you look at them, it's generally cards that are reasonably close that have the low scores. A 10 king, a 9 king, those aren't wide. They aren't that wide. 9 queen, 10 jack fits in there real good. See? So when you look at the, you got to go down the list quite a while before you find a 1 king and a 1 queen. And in my discard table, that's the only time the queen is upticked a notch. The 1 queen somehow nosed out the 1 king at being slightly safer. But there it is. And here's the 1 king, you see. 4-2, 4-3. That's the only difference in the discard tables that's significant, is a 1 queen versus a 1 king. So, but they're a long ways from the top. And if the other thing I want to mention while we're talking about it is odd cards and even cards. So if you believe that even cards are safer, then you would throw a 6-8 to your opponent's crib rather than a 7-9, right? 7-9 is both odd. Odd cards are supposed to be bad to put in my opponent's crib. Haven't you ever heard that? Even cards, good thing to put in an opponent's crib? How about a 1-3 and a deuce 4? The deuce 4 scores more in your opponent's crib than the 1-3. They're even. The 1-3 are both odd. There's no rhyme or reason to it. That's why I say it's important to learn at least the top 9 or 10 low-scoring discards and the top 9 or 10 best ones of your own crib. And unless you want to test it, and you can test it. For instance, if you wanted to test the value of a deuce 4 or a 1-3, you could do 100 as I did on that one hand simulations, and you would see that the deuce 4 works with a lot more cards than the 1-3 does. Just the opposite on your crib. Just the opposite on yours. But on the opponent's crib, very often the odd cards score less, have a lower average than do the even cards. But yet folks will persist in saying, well, if you don't know anything about discarding at all, just make sure you put even cards in your opponent's crib and odd cards in your own. Well, it's not a science, but it doesn't work as often as it works. I mean, you might be able to point to a couple of examples where the odd card, even card syndrome worked. But the numbers don't bear it out. When you start going through the numbers, they don't bear it out. Well, some of you know the highest ranked cribbage player in the world. I won't mention his name here because he might think I'm expecting him to reimburse me for some advertising. But he says one of the best discards in cribbage is a 1-7. They're both odd. I wonder why they're better than a 2-6. Both even. Anyway, sometime you get a chance. You can ask him. But it's just another example. If you just play it that way and you didn't know what the averages were, your game would not improve very much. It's true when they turn the crib over and it's a 2, 4, 6, 8 with a 10 on the deck, it doesn't count.
I know it's smart. On Thursday.
So, there's no count there because there are no odd cards. But the idea that somehow odd cards will hurt you more on your opponent's crib than will even cards. There's no pattern to it. At the best you could show, it would work maybe half and half. So it's better just to know the averages and play by the numbers. I covered Mike Schill's analogy before. You should have a paper here. I'm sorry, some of the numbers are getting a little faint. If yours has a date on it that mine does, down at the bottom it says October 26, 1999. So it's been floating around for 18 years. But if you follow one of these across, there's a lot of information. Let's just follow the 10 king across the top of the sheet. You see how many points it added up to? 14,946 in 3,884 cribs. So the average is, you divide that into the number of points, is 3.848. Notice the percentage of 2 points or less.
Ras, what's the U's and the S1s and stuff? I don't understand.
What's that?
Like you have the king, 10 king, and then U.
Unsuited, suited.
10 king to opponent. Discard selections, opponent's crib. There are 91 discards. 10 king is the lowest scoring discard you can make to your opponent's crib. There's nothing that comes close to it. It scores 2 points or less, 45.494%. That's almost half the time. Now it's true, if you get into 8 points or more, then the 10 king scores more than the 9 king does. But the 9 king gets quite a few less zeros, a whole lot less zeros, and a lot less 2s. So I guess if you're afraid of the big crib, then you can come down on the side of the 9 king. The second one down the page is the 9 king. If you follow that on across, you'll see what percentage of the 10 king cribs are 8 points or more, 14.418%. That's about 1 in 7. 1 in every 7 cribs with the 10 king is 8 points or more. And then if you look at 12 or more, it does that 2.111%. 2 times in 100. 2 times in 100 is worth 12 or more. But you see that you can follow that across on every discard of the top. On this first sheet you got, these are all the discards that average up to 5 points. From the 10 king at 3.8 to the final one on the list is the 4-7 at 4.997.
But what are the different letters? I mean, I see that the U is unsuited, but then you've got S1 and...
Okay, that's a good question, and it says something to me. If it says U, it means the average is headed up. If it says S, it means it's stable. If it says S8, like the 6 queen says S8, that means it's been stable for 8 postings. There hasn't been more than 0.05 of a difference in the average in 8 postings. So that's what that means. It tells me, like if you look at the 9 queen, it's stable. You might even find a D in there somewhere. Go down a ways, you find a 4 king and a 3 king. D means it's headed down.
What do you mean? The average, okay.
In other words, the D, S, and a U, if it says U, it's headed up. The average is headed up. If it says S, it's stable. If it has a number following the S, it means the number of postings that it has been stable. And if it says D, it means the average is headed down. Then the next page is all the others that you probably hadn't ought to throw, because all of these average more than 5 points. This whole page averages more than 5 when you toss them to your opponent's crib. Any questions on that? You get a chance, look it over. They're all there between that second page that's over 5 and the first 2 pages back to back are those that are under 5. I'm going to cover one more here, and that'll be time for us to start playing a little cribbage tonight. Dave, could you hand out that next, hand out those next 2, they kind of go together.
Did you go over in the continuation of the second lesson to discarding to your own crib on the back of that one sheet where?
Yeah, because it's a transition sheet. So one side of that is for your own crib, and the other side
Right,
is for...
but where we had to figure out which ones we would discard to your own crib. Did you go over these?
No, I didn't go over them, just in the interest of time.
Oh, okay.
We've been a little
Talk about it
behind
later.
most of the time, so I didn't go over them. So you have one here, and you know when it says ACC, American Cribbage Congress, across the top, that it's from their internet site. And you see over in the right margin there, it shows the authors who are featured in that section. Barlow, Chambers, Culver, and Rasmussen. I don't have a book. I got a suitcase full of material, but no book. And at my age, I doubt if I'll have a book. But, anyway, this one goes back to 2002, that's 15 years ago, and it shows a comparison of the King 6 and the 9 Queen. They're both very good discards to your opponent's crib. You know, consider them pretty much garbage discards. If you can make them, they're great. And you notice the first thing it does, how this paper came about, we were sitting at a table at a tournament, and 4 or 5 people were talking about their favorite discard was a king six, and somebody said, I think mine's a 9 queen. And that's where this went. Either one is very good. If you have them consistently, your opponent will have some low-scoring cribs. If you look at these discards just in broad terms, which I've done here in this first little block, 7 or fewer points. They're almost identical. I mean, within a couple points of being the same. King 6 gets 86.21% of cribs at 7 or fewer. Queen 9 gets 88.4. And then if you look at what happens after 8, they're still very similar. King 6 gets 13.79, and 9 queen gets 11.60. Then it breaks it down further here. You see 0 cribs. Nine queen has the edge on 0 cribs. 6 king gets 6.9% of them, and 10.6% for the queen 9. If you look at the other end of the scale, 12 to 15, then there's quite a difference. By the way, I want to mention that only one time in all the time I've ever played cribbage did a 9 queen average more than 12. How could it be? It averaged 9 queen for 16. They were suited with a 10 jack suited and a 5 of the suit to match the jack. It came out, and 1 for the jack was 16. I couldn't believe it. I'd never seen it but once. So 9 queen gets fewer large cribs. And they're very close. If you have the choice, you won't generally have the choice in a single hand. In 6 cards, you won't generally have the choice of making a 6 king or a 9 queen. But I just show this to show the difference. And then the next one compares the king 9 and the king 10. And you'll notice the king 10 gets twice as many 0 cribs as does the king 9. They're almost identical, getting up to 2. King 9 has the advantage 3 to 7 points. They're almost identical, 8 to 11. 12 to 15, the king 10 is almost double. 16 or more, never had a 16 or more crib with a king 9. Had 11 cribs with a 10 king of 16 or more points. In fact, one of them was 20 at Canyonville. Pone put 2 5s and cut a 5. Have you had that one happen to you yet? On your 10 king discard? Yeah, it can happen. So if you're scared of the bigger cribs, 8 and above, toss a 9 king. If you absolutely need a 0 crib, toss the 10 king. 10 king gets a lot more zeros than does the 9 king. So it depends on the position on the board, and then you know, very often in this game, when I look at the board, I say, I can let my opponent have 8 or 10 points in the hand. I just can't let them have a crib. If they get a crib of 4 or 6 points along with an 8 or 10 hand, I'm in trouble. So the best thing I can do on that particular hand is try to keep the crib low scoring. And a 10 king has the best chance to do that. So don't miss an opportunity to pitch the 10K. And don't worry about if they're both hearts or diamonds or clubs or spades. Very low scoring discard. And it can also bite you for eight or more. I think this is a good time to break. Let's take a little break, play some cribbage, and I'll circulate around and look over your shoulder. Are there any questions?